Welcome back to our tutorial series. In this episode, we'll be going over how to create a cabin environment that's used for architectural visualization. So the first thing we'll do is actually get our scene built. So here we have our model, and as you can see, there's nothing in the scene at the moment. So we'll want to start off by heading over to the toolkit on the left and dragging in the lighting presets. So as you can see, nothing will actually happen when we drag this in, and we'll actually need to load the lighting in. So we've gone for foggy morning here, and as you can see, that loads a new blueprint in, and we can swap between these, and we'll get a completely new lighting setup. As you can see, we can swap back at the click of a button. So when we actually head over to the blueprint, this will actually have your standard lighting setup within here. So you have your directional light, your fog, post-process, sky atmosphere, and a couple of others, such as volumetric clouds. So as usual, you can tweak these values, and we've actually pre-inputted values in here as well to get the desired look. So you should be able to have a nice lighting system straight off the bat. So now we have our cabin. We'll actually want to start by creating a forest, and we'll drag the biome generator in now and start by basically laying out our forest. And with a close-up scene like this, you don't necessarily need a huge environment, as a lot of the view can be masked by the assets. So as you can see, we've clicked configure and we've got the preset biome. And obviously at the moment we've got trees in the house, which is not good. So that's where the path cut actually comes in. And although it is called path cut, it can be used to cut out areas that you don't want foliage. So let's start by expanding this to the volumes of the house and just drag that over. And when we go back to our holder, we can configure, and now the meshes from the inside have gone. So for quick iterations like this, it's really handy, and obviously we can actually create a path to the front of this house as well. So let's do that now, and we can hold Alt and the move tool to create new points if needed, and we can reconfigure, and we now have a path. So let's actually start by tweaking some of the meshes in our biome so we can get something a bit more realistic. So we've got a tree pack here, and we're using the Scots Pine pack, and we'll just drag these trees in, and as you can see already, the biome's really starting to come together a bit more. And if we need to add more meshes, we can just press the plus button on the array, and that will add new input selections. So let's just tweak our tree bounds now. And a lower value means trees can spawn closer together, and a higher value means they spawn further apart. And we'll just speed this section up, as it's essentially the same thing. We're just swapping the meshes out and then tweaking the values. So it's really handy to do this one at a time, so you know what your biome's going to look like before you spawn in hundreds and thousands of meshes. As you can see, especially for forests, these systems are pre-designed to essentially work really well with these assets types. And if you did want to do something like a desert and dunes, like, it works exactly the same, and you just tweak the values to whatever you're after. The scatter on mesh PCG system that we've just added in is also really handy for blocking out scenes really fast. So we can just put a designated mesh on the right there, and the meshes on the PCG system will scatter on top. And we can go ahead and swap the actual scatterable meshes on the system here to anything you want, and we've just gone with a bit of extra detailed trees and rocks and stuff like that. And once one of these systems is good to go, you can essentially duplicate it and create as many as you want. So it's really handy for blocking out a scene with a lot of detail in a short amount of time. And now what's really cool is we have our path cut, which cuts the meshes, and we have our path generator, which actually generates a 3D path for us. So this is really, really handy for creating a path or a coastline. You can really do a lot of things with the system. And obviously, currently we have trees overlapping and we have our low poly meshes still. So we want to fix that. So let's just make the extents a bit smaller. And we'll remove our trees as we already have trees in the scene. Let's just reduce a bit of the density. And then we can start by swapping the meshes out for our high poly ones. And depending on the input mesh you're using, you can really adjust the density based on that. So if you have really large meshes like we have here, you can have a lower density. And if you have really small meshes, then you can use something with a bit of a higher density. And we're just doing a bit of manual set dressing here as well, as PCG is great, but the artist touches are really what brings a scene to life. So, you know, use these systems and use your own creative ideas as well. Like, it's up to the user to create the story. And now we'll move on to the UI section of the experience. So we'll want to head over to the Creator Tool login window, click Configure, and you'll see on the right we now have a Capture Tool and a Panorama Manager. So with these in the scene, we could essentially render, but before we do that, we want some hotspots to actually render some panoramas out. So head over to the toolkit on the left again, and we'll drag a hotspot in. And this hotspot is essentially where the panoramas are going to render from. So you want these at human height, but obviously if you're seen as an astronaut floating in space, then you don't really need to follow human heights here, but it's recommended to do so, especially in architectural scenes. And we can pilot this, but make sure you disable the camera in the top left as we did, as if you do pilot the hotspot and then move around, then your hotspot will also move around with you. And we can just duplicate these as we have in our previous tutorials. And it's always best to duplicate the highest number hotspot rather than the lowest, as it will keep the order correct. So if you duplicate hotspot 7 to 8, then the next one after that would be 9, and so on and so on. And if you had 0 to 10 hotspots and you duplicated number 5, then it would mess the order up. But we can fix this as well, but it's best practice just to duplicate the one that has the highest number. So let's go to our panorama manager, gather points, click this twice, and then we will see all of the hotspots in the list. As you can see, pano 0 is our starting point. So this is the first pano in the tour that you'll actually view. So how do we actually add UI to our tour? Well, the first thing we want to do is we're starting outside is add a navigation hotspot, or navigation CTA, should I say. So with this, we can basically tell the user what hotspot to go to when they click onto this cube. And obviously we don't want just a standard cube in the tour. We want something that has UI on it, and we'll come back to this in a second. So as you can see, there's a hotspot input button. So that means when we click hotspot 1, or we click this CTA we've just created, we'll always go to hotspot 1. And you can use this on doors to get to other rooms. You can use it on stairwells to get upstairs. The possibilities are really endless of how you use these navigation CTAs. For example, you could have a map, and if you press a button on the map, then it could take you to a completely different world. So let's just drag in a floor arrow. And this can either be a sprite sheet or a static image. And in our case, we've gone for a sprite. So as you can see, it's just a simple sprite with animated arrow. And we'll need to change a few settings here. So we'll want user interface 2D for compression settings and no min-maps, which is on by default in this tab. And let's just open up our arrow CTA. We'll swap this to image animation. Open that up. And let's go and drag our image we've just imported in. And as you can see, we've got a little prompt to set the width and height of the total number of frames. So let's do this now. And with the sprites, it's really important that these values we're putting in are the actual still image within the sprite. So you're not inputting the sprite settings themselves here, but you're inputting what one PNG image would be. And cool, now we've done that, we can add our clickable style over. And once we actually view this in the scene in a second, so we'll refresh it, we can see it's currently facing the wrong way. So let's just rotate this around. And it will basically give you a little prompt. So these style visualizers can be enabled or disabled at the user as well. But it's really handy, especially when you have a lot of UI elements in a scene. You can really see what you're doing with these visualizers. So they don't actually render in panoramas, but they just render in the editor. So we can start duplicating these around and reselecting our hotspots, and you can really guide where you want the user to go by using these navigation CTAs. And once you've created one, you simply just have to change a hotspot, and if you wanted a different CTA to pop up on it, then you could just create a new clickable style. And we're just testing what the visibility is here, as obviously we don't want to have an arrow pointing forward if we're looking backward. So as you can see, we can trace what hotspots are visible as well with these lines. And if we turn off infinite visibility, that will essentially mean well, it's as it says, if it's infinite visibility, the hotspots will essentially, you'll be able to click any hotspot in the scene, even if it was 100 kilometers away. So with the disabled infinite visibility, we can reduce the range and only give the user specific hotspots or UI in a given range. So now when we're tracing, we can only move to hotspot 1 from hotspot 0. And with the hotspot edit list, we're actually free to add in hotspots as well. So now we essentially can go from 0 to 1 and 0 to 2. And this also works for disabling hotspots. So the next thing I want to do is actually add a video screen. And as you can see in this situation, we have a plant mesh blocking the screen. So this wouldn't work as intended, as the mesh is essentially blocking the screen. So we can either move this over or we can disable collisions on it. Either works. So let's click the screen and we'll have that as hidden, as we probably don't want to see it, the leaves overlapping the screen in this case. So with this, it will essentially default to the panorama rendering of whatever's on the screen. So now let's actually make this video functional. So we'll add in our video blueprint. And if we just scale this down, we can either do it on the actual Unreal editor, or we can change the scale on this handy little widget we've got as well. And it also allows you to input your aspect ratio. So it can be, if you know that already, it can be really handy for scaling a screen to the correct size. That's looking about right. So let's head over to our content and we'll create a folder called videos. And we'll just drag a video into here. So now with this video in, we can actually drag that over to our BP video. And it's really as simple as that. So we will now have a functional video in our tour. We've also got HTML5 controls, which is pause, play, fast forward, rewind, and they can be a bit intrusive, so it's good to disable them, but it's really up to you on what you'd like the video to be viewed as. And the next part is going over products. So we want to sell some products in the scene, so let's start by adding in some BP products. So we'll want to overlay that over the image. And we can just adjust the values. So the clickable area the user will have will actually be the product. And we also want to make sure that we're not actually going into the collisions of other objects. So we may want to bring this up or either disable the collisions on the desk so the CTA actually picks up for the user. And we've now got a product CTA attached to this. And as you can see, by default, we have a pulsing dot. So this will essentially show the user this product is shoppable. So in some scenarios, it's best to, as we reduce the range of hotspots before, you can also reduce the range of interactables. So if you have lots and lots of products in a scene, then you can reduce how many CTAs are visible to the user in one given time. As you can see, we've just set a couple more up. And we can remove or refresh the visualizers for all the objects in the scene from the capture tool. And we'll just duplicate some more of these around. And once again, we can just change the description on these. So once you do have one set up, you can duplicate them and just input your new fields. And by default, distorted's turned off, and you can see we've just enabled distorted. So what this will do is where the cube's facing in the actual scene, with distorted enabled, it will never orientate towards the camera. So it can be really handy for having things on walls which you don't want to basically rotate. So for analytics to appear in the scene, we'll want these BP rooms. So we essentially scale these over the area we want to track the objects within. And when I say the objects, I essentially mean all the CTAs, the hotspots, the videos we've just set up. So the BP room is essentially the name of the room you want to track. So if you had a store, for example, you might have a beauty room, you might have a fashion room, and this can really help with analytics as you're able to distinguish what area the analytics should fall into. And now with that all done, we can actually render the scene out. So we'll head over to the final page in the little tutorial. And first thing we want to do is actually get our map. So we'll put that into the top. And how many hotspots do we have here? Let's just check that now. We've got 16, so we'll put 16 in the end range. And we'll come up with a name for this experience. and we'll have a C name as well. And for the UI model, we can get that from the plugins folder. And this will essentially give you default UI on your experience. So we can drag that in, and we'll want to set these paths as well. So let's go to Edit, Project Settings, and we'll head over to Movie Pipeline CLI Encoder. Let's drag the executable path over, and we'll also want the command line. And with those pasted, the automated rendering process will now correctly function. And we'll also want to just put PNG, AAC, and PNG into the codecs. And this will essentially give you the file format we're after. So now with that done, we can click onto either create, which would create an experience, or render panoramas. And we've just skipped ahead to actually see what the final link looks like with the current setup we've done. So as you can see, when we go over to the products, here are the CTAs we've previously added. You can also see the floor arrows as well we added, and a few more of the products around the space. Let's just go over to the lounge area where we added that video as well. As you can see, we blocked it here, and this is the place we enabled it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.